All right. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time to come on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm thrilled to chat. We've been communicating for a few months, and it's given me a lot of time to think about questions to ask. And you guys have gone through a lot, actually, since we first started discussing you being a guest on the podcast. So, everybody, thank you for listening. This is episode 30 of Behind the Builder. We've got Nick Dodson here. He is the CEO of Fuel Labs. Nick, I would love to give it to you to give a short little background on yourself, and we can get right into the questions.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, yeah, maybe to give like a quick overview of my life. So, I got into the space in like around 2013-ish. Initially with mining and Bitcoin, that kind of thing. I evolved out of that into trying to build something on Bitcoin at a very early stage. It was around the like name coin era of things in crypto. And then after kind of doing that, found Ethereum, found this whole space. Started to work with Ethereum at a very early stage. So, you know, built some of the first apps on Ethereum, built some of the first SDKs, things like that. I joined Consensys. I was working there, doing the same things, building SDKs, etc. Then I left Consensys and wanted to, basically solve some of Ethereum and blockchain's scalability challenges. And I think that this was something that it came up because after I left Consensys, I wanted to just do some simple projects on Ethereum. So that was the whole goal, is just a few simple projects. What ended up happening is like in building a simple wallet and trying to think about can a consumer use it, you start to realize how limited Ethereum actually is, basically, as a system in general. Like at the time when I was doing that, like around 2018, you couldn't have a consumer app really on crypto. Everything didn't work, and a lot of the stuff that said it worked didn't work. And so, there was no way for this thing to really scale beyond the kind of, small community that we had. And so in and around that time, like around 2019, rollups became a thing, or started to become an idea and a thing, and sort of inheriting the security of Ethereum, but doing something different on top. And that idea, I think, was really powerful to both solve the original problems that I had just trying to build some simple consumer apps, but also solve a whole other host of challenges that you just face when you're building on these systems. So that's really where Fuel kind of begins in terms of, my life. And, we shipped Fuel V1, which was the first roll up on Ethereum. So that's, stage 2. It's got, really high throughput for a roll up. I think at the time we could probably fit like a few hundred TPS. It was it was sort of a model, maybe you could say, for how to build some of these systems and build rollups and these kinds of things on Ethereum and build layer 2s more broadly. And unfortunately, it's still one of the only ones that's stage 2, and no one else, after millions and hundreds of millions of dollars from extremely smart people, they still have not moved a lot of their systems to that stage yet. I believe they all will. I don't think it matters as much as we thought it did when we shipped it. So I think a lot of people just want to use things. They don't really care so much about the security. Fuel has evolved as well. So, I mean, even our current stuff is not stage 2, but, effectively built that system out. And then after that, realized that, beyond just Ethereum and the EVM and these other things, that you kind of need to, if you really want to solve the problem, you can't just copy and paste architecture again. So if you just take the EVM, you put it on the EVM, all the same problems with the EVM are still going to be transferred over to whatever you've done in the next layer or the layer after. So it doesn't really help that much. So you really have to change the way that these systems work in order to get the scale out of it. And at the time when we were building or designing the Fuel virtual machine after Fuel V1, we kind of looked at everything. So we looked at, everything from Wasm to Solana's environment, to Move, to a bunch of different options to try to incorporate the best ideas into a single system and really get it to a stage where we could try to build the best possible execution architecture we can think of, given the whole space, and try to come up with a tooling system, a way to use the system, and a way to build with it such that you could kind of create these super high performance apps, but that still retain a lot of the underlying security values and assumptions that we want from these systems. So that's very much like a bit of background. Before crypto, I was just a philosophy dropout and a musician. So not anything notable. Yeah.
What an end to the background. That's funny. Everybody's got a good story. And I was gonna save this question later on, but I think it's relevant to you just talking about you guys being a first mover in this space.
Mhm.
What's it like being a first mover in stage two rollups? And especially you said because people are dumping money into it, nothing's really come of it. Um, how does that relate to your guys' confidence in shipping and your message, and constantly having to pave the way and educating people on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so being the first mover was good for a lot of reasons. I mean, it gives us a lot of street cred, I think, that a lot of other people don't have. So Fuel definitely has the credibility that we can do complex things and ship really interesting and complex things. I think we did that both with Fuel V1 and as well with our more recent architecture. So I think it helps in many ways to kind of be in that position. Um, the side of it that I think it doesn't always help is just that, like, you still need to ship continuously, move new systems into that realm, and that's still really really difficult. So basically, it helps in the sense of street cred. It doesn't necessarily help in the sense of you still need to like follow up with it every time you ship new things. And the fact is that Fuel, like many other projects now, is we're shipping a lot of interesting stuff. It's still not at the best security stage that it should be, whether it's bridges or whether it's the construction of the system. So there's still a ways to go, I think, with a lot of our other architecture to kind of bring it into the same respectable area of security. But I would say that for the purposes of like hiring and what the research space knows and also what people know within Ethereum and within crypto, I think Fuel's held in a pretty high regard in terms of our ability to produce complex things and actually get them done and ship them. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really hard. But I understand the advantages, of course, of being a first mover. But I feel like there's a lot of challenges. You're paving a blank dirt road of trees almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so tell me about 2025 goals for Fuel. You've had a lot going on. I wanted to reference this tweet that you posted back in December. Let's see, is this visible here? Oops.
Yeah.
Let me make this a little bit more.
Mhm.
There we go. Got a lot going on.
Mhm.
Yeah, tell me about the overarching um, achievements you're looking for in 2025.
Yeah. So what I would say is this. Oh, sorry. I think I'm feeding back as well. I don't know if that's
Oh,
possible
no,
to.
you're good, I think, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So on the point of 2025, I think the main things are that we have a lot to do and a lot to clean up and a lot to ship. So we've shipped the main roll up on Ethereum, and as well our sequencer. And before that, many test nets. A lot of different things happened beforehand. I think 2025 is really going to be a year where we need to improve every aspect of what Fuel is and the Fuel experiences. So whether that's block explorers, wallets, the ecosystem, all the underlying infra needs to move to a different security stage. So improvements in security need to happen at the same time. And then improvements in performance too. So these will all be areas that we'll work on in 2025. The big stuff though is not technical. I would say the really big stuff that we have to kind of surmount as a project is, we're really a project that's basically mostly engineers and builders. Like we're not really, we're not growth people, or we're not necessarily community people or marketing people. It's probably the worst thing about Fuel is just the growth and marketing side of it. So I think we'll need some really fundamental change there if we want to bring out the best of what the project is to the whole space, and just kind of let people know what we're doing. For us, like we know these things can be fixed. They're solvable problems. There's other teams that I think are stronger at it than we are. So I think the kind of engineering that will be the biggest thing to get over is the growth engineering and the community engineering and the marketing engineering, not so much the actual engineering. The actual engineering we've got down. So that will happen. Things will get produced. We will. I think we'll have a lot of really great milestones to meet. But the main thing is like, let's get all that other stuff in order too. So I think Ethereum actually, in a very funny note, is going through a very similar thing right now, mainly just around the fact that I think most people in the world might even know Solana better than Ethereum, simply just because it's this meme coin chain, and I think Ethereum doesn't really have a home for itself as a position or something in the space. It's very much a complicated thing, and Ethereum's always been complicated since the very, very beginning. It's basically never had a position. It's always just been something really, really interesting. And in a sense, Fuel has the same problem, which is it's very hard for me to tell you what Fuel is because there's so much to it. I think we're starting to get some ideas, especially from other projects, how to pitch it. Like, I can tell you that we want to make the fastest rollup. We also want to make the fastest layer 2, and we also want to make the most decentralized sequencing system. So, I can tell you that, and that kind of encompasses some things. But I think the struggle there is just that very much so in the way that Ethereum is struggling, we're also struggling with just how to position what Fuel really is. But I think what we want to do is bring a lot more people involved in that, because I think together we can actually find really interesting stuff. It shouldn't always be on the project necessarily to position what everything is. Ethereum never did. Like the community positioned it, not the foundation. So
Right.
I think we might have to follow suit with some of that, but we'll have to help it along in its process, I think.
Yeah, this is a great topic of conversation, especially this week. It's been a lot of my timeline. I was listening to, do you ever, that Blockworks podcasts, Empire, and yeah, they
Yep.
just released one on Friday. They were talking about BD and marketing on Ethereum, and it's really interesting because obviously they just released Etherealize. What do you think about Etherealize?
To be honest, I don't know much about it. So
Okay, then move on. And then let me ask you, do you think there's any teams in Ethereum that are doing well on BD and marketing, or do you think that you guys need to pull from Solana BD and marketing strategy? Do you think you can pull, or do you need a new strategy?
Yeah, so I wrote a pretty long post to the Ethereum community about this on Twitter the other day, which was effectively that I think what's working for Solana won't work for Ethereum in terms of how it's positioned or what it is as a thing. Ethereum is very much a very different thing. I describe Solana sometimes as like American Ethereum, where it's just like, it just very much feels like a bunch of Americans are building it. Whereas, in terms of our side, it's very much a different kind of thing. So Ethereum was never really an American project. It was always a kind of global project. So I think there's very big differences in terms of how it's actually working and what it actually is. Sorry, am I still?
Oh,
still
sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to pull up the tweet. Sorry, it
no
should be
worries.
still recording.
No worries.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's the thing about BD and marketing too. It's really difficult because you can work on these products and everybody understands what a good product looks like, and it takes an unbelievable team of like engineers to get that done. But BD and marketing is a different beast. People didn't understand that meme coins could lead to people recognizing Solana as the internet capital market. Like,
Sure.
that's bizarre that those two things are even connected.
Yeah, but I mean that's in a sense it actually all kind of does make sense, because Ethereum and its community shied away from a lot of this stuff. We did a lot of this already, and the reason why I never took off was because the community was built on different grounds and on different assumptions, and also in a completely different regulatory environment. So I think that all of these things make Ethereum a very different kind of project than what Solana is, which is a much different beast, I would say. Yeah,
absolutely. And How about your goal for your end users? Is your goal to make them happy?
I think that I think an end goal of maybe a good product or a good system is that for the few interactions you're going to get with human beings, because there's millions of products and people are taken up by all kinds of different things, that for the experience they did have, they had a great experience. And I think that, like, you know, that's something that just when you build things, I think you really want to make sure it happens. Whether if you're building for a dev, then you want to make that experience for a developer. But similarly, you want to make that experience for a user. So it's very much, I mean, making them happy, maybe making them satisfied, probably more important. Um, I think so. I think a goal for us is that whatever you see in blockchain in terms of experience, like Fuel can probably do better. Like on the technical side, I think we can do a lot better. It'll be a lot more interesting and be done in a more interesting way. So, I think we can create amazing experiences. It's just more or less that we'll need to get there. And also, I'm kind of excited for different projects and how they're approaching UX now, because I think the best UX is one where you really don't know it's crypto. You don't have any idea, you don't really care, and it's all taken care of and it's all safe. And I think, that's going to be our best experience probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. That's what I try to explain to people that are like, how do I start using crypto and every day? So yeah, we can honestly move on to next subject. I'd love to talk about the token a little bit and how that's been going, what you're thinking about that, anything you'd like to share for goals in 2025.
Yeah, for sure. So on the token side, what I would say is that, like, right now, I think we need to do a lot more work on, I think, just explaining the whole fuel architecture, getting the message out there about what makes us different, what makes us more, you know, again, what makes us probably a better option than most architectures out there. I think in terms of where, I want the system to go, I would say that right now the core utility is for staking in the sequencing network, and that's very good. That's a very good start. But if we want to really kind of turn things up and make things more interesting, we have some really interesting bonding mechanisms used to sort of remove fees and remove other difficulties from application design. So this is where the fuel token also comes in, and where emissions come in, that it can be redirected to even more useful things than just people keeping emissions, for example. So that's going to be another area that I think we want to see a lot of improvement on. And then as well, I think there's a lot of areas where when you have a validator set, or you have a group of people that are working against a token and a bonding mechanism, it allows you to do all kinds of new designs that I think are also really helpful. So, for example, building bridges or fast finality or these kinds of things. And when you have that network set up, it gives you all these new tools, sort of outside of rollups, because rollups are very much inheriting the security of Ethereum. It's a very different kind of thing. But I think what I'd also like to see with Fuel is that effectively we have a Fuel version, you could say, of something like Wormhole, where funds from anywhere can just enter and exit the kind of Fuel rollup itself in a very fluid way. Because right now, I think Fuel bridging is not great. There's like a 7-day withdrawal. There's a lot of risk to coming into a new chain, or something different, something more niche. So we want to lower that barrier quite a bit. And I think that our actual validator set and these other things we use for the sequencer, just proposing new sequencing positions for blocks, whatever, that's not really enough. I think that's like great, but you want to see them do a lot more useful things. So this will be part of the other process. So it's like getting rid of fees, making capital more efficient, and then as well sequencing and decentralizing block production. So these are things that I think are the kind of core avenues that I want to see Fuel be used in, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Fees to zero. I've seen that all over your page.
Mhm.
What how would you like to message that to people? Do you think that you'd rather have the product be used first, or do you want people to come to Fuel because of the zero fee feature?
I think zero fees are going to be more important when we actually have other reasons to come to Fuel. So right now, as a user, there's not a lot of reason to come to Fuel other than you love the tech and maybe you want to experiment with a new model, you want to experiment with some of the new things that are there. It's not enough yet, I would say, to make it, you know, to make someone, say a capital allocator or something, come to us versus say Base or Arbitrum or Solana, right? But as more use cases and things come up, as things become more efficient on fuel, then there'll be more reason to come. And then you want to make sure that, like, for the bridging side, that's taken care of. So bridging's like nothing super smooth. And then on the fees side, so driving fees to zero makes the apps better, all that kind of stuff. But if you think about it more concretely or more interestingly, the best way to settle trades, for example, is with an order book. Order books have cancellations. Cancellations are expensive. If an app could subsidize those cancellations such that, you know, you can still do them on chain, but there's cancellations for free, that's where, like, from just a purely capitalistic perspective, dropping the fees to zero is super important. Outside of that, like, obviously games and other things, you don't want fees involved. So like we shipped a version of Sway Farm that has kind of the bonding mechanism and fees covered. But I think that, like, you know, that's where you'll really see sort of some of the innovation happen, I would say. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what about partnerships for fuel? When you are looking at new avenues to explore, bringing new people into the ecosystem, how do you make decisions on whether or not long term that's going to be what you guys need to focus on?
Yeah. So I think on the point of partnerships right now for fuel, like, the main things will just be that we'll need partners on a multitude of fronts. So new projects to improve both our DeFi and our bridging situation. I think that's going to be really key. You know, we have a bunch of new partnerships coming up on things like NFTs and that kind of stuff. What I would say about, like, evaluating partnerships is just that it's very much what your project's going through in the moment. So like for us, we just have a lot of core basics that need to be, you know, bodied up or taken care of. So that's really very much the focus right now. But in the future, I think that on the partnership side, I'll be looking to partner with firms and people that have nothing to do with crypto. In fact, the further away it is from crypto, the more interesting it'll be. Mainly because, and you'll see this too, I think, with other chains, mainly because there's not enough people in crypto to make it interesting right now. Everyone's fighting for the same user base, which is small. It's like 20 million users,
Yeah.
and the same capital, which is largely mercenary and rotational. So it's not really worth pursuing them. You know, I mean, we will put up a very good fight on DeFi and these other things just to at least ensure that it's all efficient and working. And beyond that, hopefully a serious competitor to all the other chains. But I'm not really expecting us to, you know, really necessarily crush that in terms of growth and volume, because, you know, there's a lot of options right now in the space. So it's better to look elsewhere and to look at all the boring stuff that everyone missed. In terms of partnerships, I think
Yes.
it's way more interesting. Yeah.
Like one brand would be a dream partnership. What would it be?
A dream
And this
partnership.
outside of crypto you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, hilariously, probably a gas station, but you
No, I
know,
love that.
yeah,
That's perfect.
probably some fossil fuel companies.
Yeah.
No, I mean, um, I would say that in terms of dream partnerships, probably something that needs a level of tokenization that requires a lot of scale,
Mm,
and something that wants to experiment with new forms of settlement. So fuel being a different kind of settlement system than others.
mhm.
So probably some company like that. You know, if I could name a few, probably, you know, some of these social apps, like if Telegram, for example, didn't have its own blockchain, that would be like a perfect app, you know,
Sure.
to do. In fact, I think their blockchain is pretty bad. So if they replaced it with fuel or like a fuel architecture, it would
Sneak
be
in
much
there.
better. I don't think Ton really has an edge right now in terms of blockchain tech. So I feel like that's, you know, that's an area we could probably improve.
Yeah, no,
But
good
yeah,
to
I would
know.
say, like, you know, social apps, I think with a lot of users that want to do a lot of tokens,
Mhm.
those are probably great cases for using fuel. And then I think there's a ton of real world asset stuff that will pop up. I really don't like the way that real world assets have been done typically in the past. But I think because of the regulatory climate shifting, it should now get more interesting. Like now that the president or whatever has done a meme coin, the gloves are basically off to tokenize the entire planet. And so, now I think things might get more interesting, basically. So we'll see about that. Yeah.
I agree. And all about culture and community, we're seeing biggest successes in crypto come from that.
Mhm.
Community at Fuel is something that you talk about often as well on your Twitter. What do you think is the most important for your community?
I would say right now for Fuel, it's kind of simple. I mean, the Fuel's community is still small. It's growing, but it's still small. And what I would say is that the people that like Fuel, they really believe that there's something here that there isn't in other projects. There's some opportunity here that makes more sense than maybe a lot of other projects. And the one thing that I think Fuel or the team needs to do is just show up for them. So it's probably the most important thing right now, which is so long as we keep shipping, improving, making everything better, staying sort of loud to what we're doing in the space, they're happy. And I think the when they're not going to be happy is when we're not improving, we're not making things better, or we're not saying it, or we're not showing it. Then they're not happy. So I think that it's kind of that simple at this point. And then of course, like we need to grow as a system. So we'll need the ecosystem to improve. We'll need new interesting partnerships, new interesting companies to work with. And then as well, I think new prototypes, experiments, and products that are not really being done or focused on in the rest of the space. So these are all going to be things that we'll need to work on. But I think what I've liked about the Fuel community is like, we did this massive drop, and naturally, like, you get a bunch of people that they're very much in it to, they're very temporary, some of them, and then some of them are actually very, very interested, and they've been interested for like years, and have been kind of quietly in the background. And I think a lot of the real community that gets formed, it gets formed when things are not great. So like, when things are not going well, and you still have people sticking around,
Yeah.
then that's your real group. A lot of these projects that had, I'd say, really successful launches, or things are kind of euphoric right now for them. The thing is like I've kind of seen that a lot over the years, like a sort of euphoria around things and just thinking, wow, this is just the greatest thing. But it's also short-lived because like Ethereum and Solana and many other really good chains, I think what makes it so valuable is not when things were good. I mean, we know when things are good, then you can say it's valuable. It's very easy. But when things are bad and people are still sticking around, that's actually what makes it valuable, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's very much that I think is super, super important. So, with Ethereum, like I think I've thought Ethereum might die like 5 times. And I'm like still here, and so very much with Solana, it's similar things, right? Like near death experiences, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of tests conviction. And I think real community is built through that. It's not built through the good times, because a meme coin that exists for 2 minutes can have a good time, and then it oftentimes has a bad time, and then you have to ask yourself, well, is there something there? Who really believes in it, right? And so, I think that in a very similar way, projects in the space should follow a similar methodology. Yeah.
It's a great concept, and I think that I'd like to raise a question too, though, because obviously there's the age-old adage or phrase of it's better to have 100 or 1,000 loyal followers than 10,000, like, just eyeballs.
Yeah.
Is this relevant, though, when the goal is to get people outside of crypto at this point? Because you had kind of touched on that we're all dipping from the same pot.
Mhm.
And at this point, we need to grow the pie.
Mhm.
So maybe that rule doesn't apply so much. I agree with you that communities are built out of that, but
Mhm.
then how do you continue to grow that community? Because now we're almost at a dead end of growth.
Right. So, what I would say is this: you absolutely are right in the sense of like when you're looking outside of crypto, then community doesn't matter as much for
Right.
sure. Like 100%. Community is important though, that within your own space or within your own ecosystem, that there is some life and belief and idea that people want to hold on to, and that really means something. And I feel like that's just important of building any kind of ecosystem or any kind of thing is like you need a base level of like belief. So,
Mm.
when we go out there and do community stuff or we do things that are, we're just trying to keep everyone up to date on like all the stuff we're working on, for example, we're doing it for the people that believe in fuel, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of those people that, as fuel matures, those people will open a lot of doors for other builders and other people in the space. So it's very important to like support and love the people you have that are closest. But I think most projects really don't have a lot. I think most projects really have 5 to 10 projects that care kind of about the thing, and the rest of them are mercenary. And then in communities, there's probably about 100 people in general in most of these communities that actually matter, that actually are pushing things forward, somewhere between 100 and say a few hundred. And then the rest of them are there's probably a lot of people that like it and they do care, but they're quite mercenary too. They'd be happy to leave or go somewhere else at a moment's notice. And that's just the nature of crypto in general, right? And so with Ethereum, there was a lot more than 100 people that actually gave a shit about Ethereum specifically, which is why it's, I think, so valuable. And similar to Bitcoin, right? Like there's more than 100 people on planet Earth that like they care about the spirit of Bitcoin or the spirit of Ethereum. I think Solana's community has some of this, but it has way less than what Ethereum has. Mainly because a lot more people in Solana are a lot more, how would I say, they've like done well, or they're like very broy or whatever.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then those people are the ones that are like the first to hit the exits when something doesn't
Mhm.
make sense, basically.
Yep.
And so like Solana will have to develop, I think, some other ways to love itself, outside of like the current status of things. And I think it is like happening, and I see it more. But I think that like I think there's a lot of opportunists with Solana versus Ethereum that had a lot more people who were. I mean, we liked Ethereum when it was worthless and
Mm.
it was really cool. This was not the case necessarily for other projects. There's a lot more expectations now. Yeah.
That's a great point, and I think also Ethereum remaining, correct me if I'm wrong, Ethereum remaining a stable coin almost,
Yeah.
kind of proves that point that these people they've stuck around for
Yeah.
through all of
100%.
the deaths of, the 7 lives of Ethereum.
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think Ethereum as a stable coin is kind of funny, just in the sense that, I mean, that's sort of a byproduct again of not being able to sell it. I just
Right.
don't think
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
I just don't think people on planet Earth really understand it. I think they might have heard of it. They think
Yep.
it's probably interesting, and they just don't know what it is. But that's about it. Whereas
Yeah.
like at least for Solana, it's the thing you buy to go use meme coins and lose all your money. So
Right.
basically, that's it's like that Jupiter and Phantom and meme coins, and it's
Yep.
it's done.
It's
So
all
so
ecosystem.
that's and again, by the way, like that's still it's some success, and it's actually amazing. It's just not necessarily, I think, what a lot of people got into crypto to build. It's like fascinating, but not necessarily what we wanted to make originally, at least. Yeah.
I agree with you. I really do. Um, and so a little bit back to your responsibilities, your career growth.
Mhm.
Maybe we can start at the beginning. What did you learn at Consensys in the early days that has helped you run Fuel? And maybe like important things that people should keep in mind as they're growing in crypto early on in their careers?
Yeah. So what did I learn at Consensys? Well, Consensys is a really interesting beast. It's probably one of the most interesting happenings of a company to ever exist, mainly because it was super weird, and in like many good and bad ways. So, when Joe started it, it was like him and this girl that he was dating, and it was like a very funny like shop, basically, you could say, to help support Ethereum. So in the
Yeah.
very early days, it was like nothing. And he basically went around, found people who were either building or interested in crypto or Ethereum, and hired them.
Yeah.
And the first group of people in Consensys, like the first 150 people, were some of the most interesting people I've ever met. Like ever.
Legendary, basically.
Yes, yeah. And the reason why they're sort of legendary, you can say, is because they found Ethereum and crypto before it was cool, before it was
Mhm.
interesting, before it was worth anything, and they just liked it because we liked it. And we everyone had a different ideological view, by the way. Like, you had some libertarian people, you had some basically communist people, you had all kinds of different people in the same group, which made it
Yeah.
super fascinating. And at the time, it was very positive sum. So, like, you know, the person who does marketing who's super liberal is hanging out with like some guys like an anarchist or like libertarian conservative type, and the conversation is very much like, how do we make Ethereum better? And you're just looking at that and you're going like, this is going to be valuable. Like, if you can get these two people together to do the same thing, it's like clearly they see completely different things for what this
Yeah.
means, but it's very interesting. So the
Super
first 150 people were super fascinating. Then what happened is Joe started to hire a lot of the like New York MBA types. Like, basically,
Mhm.
the office was in Brooklyn, but he started to slowly hire more people from Manhattan.
Yep.
And he kind of, it's his own instinct to sort of do this, because I think he was thinking, well, these people are where the value is. So bringing in more people like this
Right.
will create a perception of institutional thinking around Ethereum that would be really important. And I think what was funny about that is that just so much of the really good stuff that Consensys was building got deprioritized, and then these business people got super prioritized. But the business people don't know anything, so
Yeah.
they just do business people things, which is effectively a
Right.
mixture of social climbing,
Yeah.
back and building sort of social infrastructure that is worthless,
Sure.
and really taking up everyone's time. And the first 150 people were very much people that were like, "Oh, you have a problem. Like, how can I help you solve that problem? I don't know anything about it, but I'd love to just solve it with you."
Yeah.
And so, we went from kind of like a hippie village into like, your worst case scenario, what do you call it? Like, consulting firm. And I mean, I even had someone backstab me in the company that I barely talked to and didn't even know. And like, it was just funny to me because when it happened, I was like, I don't know anything about this person, and they don't know anything about
Oh
me.
my
But,
god.
because I was in the Toronto office and they were in the New York office, it's kind of easy to like spread the rumor, or whatever. And
Yeah.
when I got to New York, and I was like, wow, like, this guy really doesn't like me. And so there was just weird stuff like that going on. So, the first 2 years.
Total garbage waste of time.
Yeah, yeah, and it turns out, like, when the banks audited, Consensys or whatever, JP Morgan, to try to see if they'd buy it or whatever, they evaluated, this is the best part about it all. They evaluated all the stuff that the first 150 like kids built
Yeah.
worth like billions of dollars, and then all this stuff that these MBAs built at like a few million.
No.
It's just like a giant slap in the face to like every Chicago
Seriously.
business school person ever, that like, your MBA is worthless, and like a bunch of
Oh,
kids writing code is worth way
that
more
is
to the planet.
hilarious.
And like, bankers are going to tell you that. Not anybody, a banker is going to
Like,
tell you that. So it's like, it's pretty rough. So anyway, like, the fact that
that's
Joe
good.
though did both versions and also continued to evolve whatever Consensys was,
Mhm.
Joe's like a really interesting person. And I think that I learned a lot from him, and I learned a lot from Consensys. I'm very grateful for the whole thing, as crazy as it was. But basically, like, it was a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think what it shows you is that you can build really interesting groups and companies. Some things you try don't work. Like they tried this flat structure and it was a disaster. You do need
Sure.
some hierarchy. Like you need some leaders, you need decision makers, you need people to look up to.
Yeah.
So like humans are hierarchical, unfortunately, but at the same time, you know, you get to see all kinds of different things happen, different kinds of people. So, you know, that's really valuable. With Fuel, I mean, we took a lot of those lessons in the early days. We hired a lot of interesting people, but also, you know, we tried to enforce some structures so that we don't kind of lose ourselves. But, you know, Fuel's been through its own kind of, it's had to kind of reinvent itself a few times within the company to get to where it's at now. And then now it's going to need to reinvent itself again, because we're a lot of engineers that now will need to do a lot of growth and community stuff. So like, we're going to have to sort of evolve again, basically, to get there. Yeah.
Sounds like a perfect lesson you learned from, not that you would hire MBAs, but you saw exactly what happened when a company did start hiring a bunch of MBAs.
Yeah, I mean, I think MBAs and these kind of business types or finance types, like, I think for certain things, they're super powerful.
Mhm.
And when you can kind of like harness them into the right areas, they can like go be a kind of psychopathic shark into like a certain area. And they really like will get there, you know, because they're
Yeah,
just like, they're super on it. And some of the most A-type people are kind of like that. So, you know, in a sense, like they can be harnessed, but they're also psychopaths sometimes. So you need to be
totally.
very like careful as to how you use the psychopathy basically within a company. And like, you know, they just always social climb to power. And it's
It's true.
very, it just, it's very annoying because like, you know, I think that we're all kind of over some of that and we just prefer to, you know, work together and try to solve problems and be honest with each other. But
Right.
uh, you know, but there's certainly a place for people like this in the world. I mean, I think there's reasons why they're here, you know. So so the force of nature, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a place for everybody. And I think that young companies like crypto is in a really interesting opportunity right now to start hiring people from backgrounds outside of crypto.
Mhm.
And also like starting to mold them, and not to make this sound bad, but like mold them into the way they can be, because I think there are a lot of people like may go into like a typical consulting firm and it's like
Mhm.
it's a pretty crazy environment. Like I have my fair share of friends that did that post college. Um it's ugly stuff, and they're not really focused on like building something or bringing value in a certain way. They're trying to climb social ladders within their company, within their team, like
Yeah.
whatever. So if that's your takeaway from Consensys and that's something we talked about, I totally agree on all those things. For you to build out your BD marketing team this year, if that's your goal, what is that going to look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you know, I think some of the people we have are really excellent. I think it's just we need more of them and a lot more help. So
Yeah.
for us, like, you know, I think it's going to look like probably welcoming in some people that are not really at all crypto people, but that are interested in the space, that want to explore verticals that are completely different from what you typically would explore. Like, you know, find me the most boring business that actually works, and let's go talk with them because
Love
that's
that.
actually a more it's a more exciting angle than probably the same things everyone else is chasing, like social fi, DeFi, AI. Like that's so oversaturated at this point. It's not worth it. That's all been explored basically. Fuel will need like a base level of that,
Mhm.
kind of show what it's got with that. But that's not going to be enough for us to make any difference. I think it's like
Yeah.
what will make the difference is we wake up one day and there's 5 new use cases on Fuel that no one else thought about, and no one even knew they were running on Fuel, and they just
Right.
were, and it just worked. And then one day you just realize that, and then that's a more interesting reality probably than chasing all this other stuff. Now you have to still
Yeah.
chase all the other stuff because I think within our space you still want to attract certain people and certain builders, but
Mhm.
you know, I think that like Fuel's pathway to success should just be to go and chase the more interesting things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I like that a lot. Um, and how about your day to day as a CEO? What does that involve? You're active online, which is always awesome for people in any community. Yeah, can you walk me through that?
Yeah, it's probably like 10%, 20% Twitter.
Yep.
And there's like 80% is going to a bunch of different things. So I'm trying to experiment with different call structures and different ways that I can do calls because I don't necessarily like reoccurring calls so much. They kind of
Yeah.
suck the life out of you. So I think right now we're experimenting with new ways of like delegating, trying some different arrangements. During these launches, I had to do a lot more micromanagement than I would have liked to. No one likes micromanagement, and like it wasn't pleasant. It was very painful. It was really, really painful.
Yeah, that's
So
hard.
I'm gonna have to pull myself out of that and move more into here's this task. I trust you. Get it done by this time. And then if it's not done by that time, we all have to like everyone needs to question what happened, basically.
Then Nick shows up at your door.
Yeah. So I mean, I have to experiment more with that right now and changing
Yeah.
feedback cycles and that kind of thing. So the day is kind of like calls and then actually trying to do work. I don't really consider calls work though. I think that like they're kind of wasted time, quite frankly. If
Yeah.
we didn't need to do them, we wouldn't. And I think that I'd rather do calls that weren't expected, where you just want to speak with someone because you kind of got to like get an idea or like a vibe across or something like that. I want that kind of call. I don't want calls where it's like this structured thing that you have to like wake up and do. So I'm hoping to kind of rejig all of that in my day. But similarly, I think for, I try to fit in a little bit of coding here and there. I try to, coach people wherever I can, but in general, it's been a lot of like war mode founder stuff post launch. So right now we're kind of in the heat of that. We have a drop coming up in like a few days. So that's like, just hell doing these things. So basically that's taking up some time. But I think for the year, like I'll look to, I think, try to balance having kind of like war mode founder and then sort of like letting everyone actually do whatever they do best and trying to like get out of their way, basically. So that's kind of the hope for me this year is to like definitely do that. Yeah.
Fighting time is always the biggest issue. Not to hop on the AI agent trend, but I mean, I think everybody gets to this point where we talk about being more efficient in calls and structures.
Mhm.
I feel like there could be more work on this, like personalized, maybe like AI can help with that somewhere along the way. I don't
Mhm.
know. Um,
I think it could because like, well, first of all, I mean, aside from the fact that it'll probably replace all of this, so
yeah,
in the maximal version, it'll just replace it. But in the meantime, I mean, it'd be great if I could just describe the idea to an AI that was trained on someone else, and then that AI would just respond to it, and then I wouldn't need to bother that person so much because I kind of got the answer, and then I could just check with that person and be like, "Hey, your AI gave me this answer. Does this look like ballpark correct?" And they're like, "Yes," and then it's done. Um, I think something like that would be way better than doing all these
yeah,
calls. And I think that like these calls they just take up a lot of energy when they're remote. I think
yeah,
if you're working in an office with people, one of the things Fuel struggles with is that like we're fully remote, which in the beginning was amazing because you can
yeah.
hire anybody anywhere and it's this like awesome experience. It was during the pandemic, so like you know, uh, it was just a
You
great
still
time.
got top talent, full force.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and you didn't need to have an office or anything. Now Fuel is competing with a lot of companies that are co-located in San Francisco or New York,
sure.
and they're all just hanging out and vibing with each other, and that has a way better energy for problem solving and just
Yep.
doing meetings than having to do them in person. Like, you can kind of at least make the meeting more fun and interesting because it's not a video screen. So I think a problem that I have with calls is like in the remote setting, they really suck, in
Yep.
the, in the opposite setting, um, I would just say that like, they're really needed, but they need to be more spontaneous,
Yep.
yeah. So anyway, that's just like a human thing, but I do hope eventually that what we can do in the future is just have AI take over all this stuff and move to a world where you either play video games and that's our lives, and hopefully they're really good video games. I think they will be. And that's where our social competition comes in. Or we just hang out together on a farm or something else and just do human things outside of a video game. And then that's also enjoyable. And then there's this middle world where like a bunch of really awful people take over everything with AI and everything's
God.
awful for everybody. Unfortunately, like I think that world happens far too often right now. But outside of that world, these two worlds are kind of interesting, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
We do our best to make sure that doesn't happen as much as possible.
We hope, yeah.
We can hope.
Yeah.
We can try.
We can use math to try to prevent some of it, so that's good. That's at least that's okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. All right. So we've come to the end.
Mhm.
I want to give you an opportunity before I ask you 3 of my questions I ask my guests. You said you got to launch next week. Please give a public service announcement.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's well, I mean, it's not so much a launch, and as well, it's actually this week we're just doing a drop. It's our phase 2 completion, so we did a phase 2 points program, so we're doing a drop for that. The
Great.
more public service announcement worthy things are, we should have MVPs coming up for our layer 2, which is a separate network from Ignition, and that does 150,000 TPS, so that's a lot. And then beyond that, just kind of more improvements and updates on the experience, on the sequencer, some really new interesting product SDKs coming out. So order book SDKs and a bunch of other things. So some interesting stuff to come, basically.
Sweetness. That's great. Congratulations. And we'll be getting this episode out on the 10th. So, no, sorry, the 3rd.
Got
so
it.
It'll be right after. Maybe we can do a little release of this announcement. I'll get that up there. And also just one more little thing. This is going to be on Twitter, fully, YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn. I put it on chain with this company I love called pods.media. So it'll be all over the place to share. Okay. So we've got our last questions here, Nick. Advice to your younger self.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Advice to my younger self. I'd say a few things. I mean, and maybe it's just the way that my gut works, my genes work, and or my person works, or how I grew up or something. But and I actually need to take this advice now because I think I don't have it before. Some people just go through life and they handle things probably worse than me, and they do it in a way that seems way easier. And I think that I handle things very personally, and I handle things I'm oftentimes very, I don't want to say stressed, but like tense about a lot of things. And I think that, the advice to the younger self, hopefully to reverse this now, because it's still happening now, is basically that, I know it doesn't matter in that way that you need to be this way to react to it, but probably to figure out other ways to not take things so personally and or not be so stressed out all the time about like any kind of thing, right? And I think that this is something that like it's maybe just the way I'm geared, but like for example, if there's something wrong with a UI or something else and a user reports it, like I take it personally. I'm like, I don't like this. It's not good, and and I probably need to be more in this calmer, strategic, headspace of these things are going to happen 1,000 times again and again and again. You just need to have this like mindset and system to make sure it gets done, and then kind of come back to it. And like some people are just wired that way. They're just a calmer energy. They're a more strategic energy. For me, like I strategize in quiet, but and in my head, but when the world throws me things, like everything's a problem, and I think that I got to get out of that if I want to improve, but also that would be the advice to my earlier self is like work on that when you're 10, don't work on that when you're like 32, so I think that something like that would probably be the advice I would take.
Well, you know what? That's why we do podcasts and reflection, because in a week when I post to this, it'll technically be your future self talking to your younger self. So you can review it then.
We do a check-in. Yeah.
We'll do a check-in. I
Yeah.
also think I understand and I totally relate. I do think this obsession piece though, as a founder, is also appropriate.
Mhm.
And it keeps you on the money because you never are satisfied.
Yeah.
So I appreciate both things. Again, further reflection, you're always adjusting. But yeah, stress is hard. Constant tension and stress is not good for the body and mind.
No, it's not. I mean, I think in crypto, I've probably aged significantly, and then just doing fuel, I've aged like way more. And so yeah, I mean, at the same time, though, a lot of these things are just giant experiments, and like
Totally.
if it all blows up, like you're kind of hoping that at least you can always steer it to a better direction, and you give it your best go. But I think at the same time, it's also yeah, it's just important to keep the vibe good, keep the positivity, keep that kind of stuff going, and not get bogged down in these details, because there's always going to be details basically, and like you
Yeah.
can't live and die off those things all the time.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. And then what about your favorite book?
Favorite book. So yeah, I'm definitely more on the side of video and podcasts. I think I always have been in my life. I wish I could read books in a way that I could actually absorb the information. But I think almost since I was very young, I can read you the book, but it won't translate to me. Whereas if
Mm,
I watch a video or documentary or something else, like it's like photographic almost in terms of the detail. So that's the way my mind works. So in terms of books though that I have read that I think are very powerful, the most powerful one I think was probably The Social Contract by Rousseau. uh,
hmm.
as a philosophy dropout, that's definitely like more up my alley. um, yeah, I would say that book, mainly because like Rousseau, in his own way, in his own weird way, was so far ahead of everyone else in terms of where political society needed to go and where it was going, that like basically I don't know where he was getting all the ideas from, because I think he was hanging out with certain people that had some of these ideas. So but he was a musician for most of his life and a composer or whatever, and just wrote these books later in life, like I think when he was in his 40s or something. And he's a
Sure.
super weird guy. But basically, that book was super influential for me, because it shows that even at that time, there's always people who are like observers, you could say, who are kind of seeing where the wind is blowing on like a bunch of different things, way like hundreds of years ahead of someone else. And it's possible, and because they did. And a composer musician guy, in his 40s, who like he's like slept with some really older ladies and stuff, like he's just a weird he like completely reshaped our philosophical thinking on society with that book, and like and his other books too. So it's definitely worth a read. I think that's probably one of the more interesting books. Yeah.
Love it. I've heard of the book. I didn't really know what it's about or anything about Rousseau. My favorite thing about this pod is I've got a library of books of everybody's favorite reads from their life. So that's a good one. I'm reading actually one of the recommended books. I'm reading Vincent van Gogh's autobiography right now.
Mhm.
It's kind of along the lines of great thinker. I mean,
Yeah.
it was in the 1800s, so not that long ago, but like
Right.
he's saying things that are super relevant to things that I see on cringe, but Twitter and
Yeah.
like I think
Yeah.
about, and it's really cool. It's cool
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. There's these people out there that have these kinds of lines of thought, and they're so far ahead on so many things.
Yeah.
But then also they're like very broken people at the same time. So like Rousseau's very broken, and Van Gogh and other thinkers very kind of like broken people as well. Like Immanuel Kant, like super influential philosopher.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I think he was like a total alcoholic. Like his editor hated editing all his books, and like
That's
could
insane.
barely edit everything, and like but just such a crazy thinker. So Yeah, it's sort of the way humans go, but I think human problems don't change. It's mainly just the way we solve them changes, but the problems don't. So everything they say is probably still relevant today, basically, in some way or another. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is sad too because I like the back or the intro to the book is like Vincent van Gogh is like the like mental health ridden unstable artist that cut off his ear, and then it's like but then I'm like 200 pages into this book and it's been nothing but beautiful, and it's
Yeah.
like it's so sad that that's the poster child to just like a human thinking cool things.
Yeah, 100%. But unfortunately, it always goes that way. So
Yeah,
when
it does.
writers and musicians and all that kind of stuff, like society doesn't really know how to value it, and then like
No.
we kind of pick it up like 100 years later or something, and are like, well, this was way
Wow.
better than we thought. Yeah.
Right, right, exactly.
Mm.
Um, really interesting. I will add that to my Goodreads list. And my favorite question, because I feel like this is something that I really try to do better at. How do you become a good decision maker?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I don't want to say I'm a good decision maker until fuel is in a very good spot, to such a good spot that I could leave and walk away and everything's running really, really well.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to say that I'm a good decision maker yet, but I'll say that what I've learned about decision making is basically that I think there's different kinds of decisions that have to be made. So sometimes there's decisions where the value of just making the decision quickly is a lot more valuable than the decision quality itself. So like,
Mm.
there's just a lot of little things where it's just like, just think about it, give it a second, make a decision. It's not a big
Yep.
deal. And then there's decisions that are like pretty massive. And those decisions you have to have a system for to kind of deal with because they're so big. Um, I think for me, earlier on, both in fuel and in my life, um, I had a different way of reading, trusting, and understanding my intuition on decisions
Mm.
that I do now. So I would more blindly trust people on certain things. Like I had a very, very high view of trust for different things. But I think as you build these companies more and you see more human beings and you kind of like, you know, you kind of go through more and more decision making where you've either trusted someone or you've worked with someone to make decisions. You start to realize that like your intuition's way better than you think it is in terms of where your gut's going, so
Mhm.
much to an extent that you don't understand it sometimes, and that you become blinded by other people's kind of indecision or bad decision.
Mm.
So what I would say is that your gut is super powerful. I think learning how to read it to make decisions is probably as important as learning who to ask for help for decisions or making
Mm.
decisions yourself. Um, and I would just say that like unfortunately for me, my gut's been very right, and sometimes I didn't listen to it.
Yeah.
And in in not listening to it, you pay the penalty, you pay the price for it. So you know, you get cues all the time from planet Earth about what decisions you should be making, and also what your gut is telling you. You can either listen to them or ignore them, but they're still there, and you should spend a lot more time probably trying to understand your gut and how it's thinking, and making hard decisions than just making a decision. So I think that something along those lines is probably the way that I would describe it. But unfortunately I'm still not great yet at, I think, decision making. I think there's still a long way to go for me to pick up more stuff, and I think I have to listen to my own advice, because sometimes I'm quick sometimes to give advice and then not take it myself. So that's my own shortcomings as a person. Yeah.
I love that a lot, and it's a great way to end the podcast. I also appreciate the note on learn how to read your gut because it's less like just it's not like trust your gut, it's like learn how to understand what you feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a
100%.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Nick, thank you so much. I've got a lot of great I'm really excited to review this and piece it up we've got so many great things we talked about. Great announcements. Good luck for launches this week, shipping some new stuff. Thank you for your time. Thanks to everybody for watching, and it was great chatting, Nick. You are really reflective
Likewise.
and have a lot of great things to say. So appreciate it.
Likewise. It was great being here. Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, everybody. Happy day. Enjoy life. I can't say what day or what time of the day it is because everybody's somewhere else. But thank you again, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Yep.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.